Go.
Hello and welcome to Feeding Your Spirit, Feeding the Spirit even. And so I'm Sarah, I'm doing a placement at the chaplaincy at the moment, and we have got three wonderful speakers from the Christian, the Islamic and the Hindu faith. So before we get started, we're just going to briefly introduce ourselves so you know where we're coming from. So Nigel.
Yeah, hello everybody, so I'm Nigel, I'm the University Chaplain here. I'm working with these guys on interfaith work.
Lovely, thank you. And Ahmed.
So my name is Ahmed. Currently a second year pharmacy student, and I'm on the committee for the Bath University Islamic Society.
Thank you. Prayag.
Hey guys, I am Prayag and I study international development as my master's, and I'm on the committee for Hindu Society.
Lovely. Gurang.
Yeah, hi, I'm the chairperson of the Hindu Society, and good to be here.
Thank you. And Tanisha.
Hi, I'm Tanisha. I'm second year politics and international relations, and I'm representing both the societies, the Hindu as well as the Islamic one.
Lovely, thank you.
Great to have you.
So we're going to be looking at light and how light from our writings feed our spirit. So Nigel, would you kick us off? Thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much. Yes, so I've got two verses from one of the Gospels. I'll read them and then explain why that for me is just relevant in, I think, a faith journey in general, but particularly now for where I think the world is. So this is a teaching from Jesus. Jesus, in our faith, who was the Son of God, came down to earth to show us a way to get back to resume our relationship with God. But he says this: you are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. The man who walks in the darkness does not know where he's going. Put your trust in the light while you have it, so that you may become sons of light. When he finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them. So that's the very end of a conversation. That last sentence puts the context of this writing, because it's the end of a dialogue between Jesus and people who were quite critical and disrespectful, but critical, didn't understand him. And so the way he says at the end, when he finished, he left and hid himself from them, it rather implies that he said that and then went to avoid further confrontation, just to leave the ideas there. So what does he say here for me? You're going to have the light a little while longer. He is referring to himself in the sense that some time later, as you probably know, he was falsely charged, arrested, and crucified by the Romans who were occupying Israel at the time. And the Christian faith believes that he came back from death and is now alive and with God again. But here he's talking to the people as he is on earth, saying, you're going to have the light just a little while longer. But then this is the bit that matters to me. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. Put your trust in the light. And there's something here for me about two things, about first of all faith, and how he invites people to listen to him and believe in him, but also the fact that there are different eras of living. So he implies that when he goes, the light will go in that sense. There'll be darkness. So walk while you have the light. To the people listening at the time, while I am here, believe in me, walk with me, and you will grow in your faith, so that when I'm gone, your faith will continue. That's how I see it. And so, for example, if we regard faith as the source of hope, the source of guidance, in the Christian tradition, we believe that comes from following Jesus. And so here is the source of hope, the source of life, who is there an encouraging belief in him. But also, his teaching implies that there will be times when we can't see that, when life is tough, when life is dark. And I don't know whether you guys have this in your faith traditions. There's something in what's called the dark night of the soul, which is the time when we actually have difficulty seeing God, difficulty seeing, understanding, or feeling him, if you like. And it can be quite a lonely and desolate time. The reason I chose this for today is because I think now for many people, we're coming out of a period of darkness. In fact, you sometimes hear politicians, don't you, or leaders saying, we're seeing light at the end of the road in relation to COVID. And I just think that now, many people are coming out of their house for the first time, people going back to campus for the first time. And there's just this picture of this verse encouraging faith as a way of seeing the light, as a way of helping us come out of the darkness. So that's why I chose that verse for today, Sarah.
Lovely, thank you. That's really interesting, the comparison of the light and the darkness, isn't it? Does anyone want to ask Nigel of anything or kind of comment on what he shared at all?
If no one has any questions, I had two questions. So you said he was talking to people. Was this his like disciples or just the general public? He was giving a public speech. And also regarding darkness, I think you kind of clarified what you meant, because you said you have the light for a while before darkness overtakes you. So is that kind of like a reference to death or?
Yes.
Kind of situation there?
Okay, thanks, Ahmed. They're great questions. I imagine there are three groups of people listening to Jesus. So these are recorded, by John to understand how he lived. I imagine there were people who were around him who were already believing in him. And of course, the inner circle were the disciples who went with him everywhere. I think that then there were people who were intentionally opposed to him. And they're the ones who are critical. This is the end of quite a long conversation where they're having a go at him. They don't accept him and they're being critical and challenging him. And they're a small group. And then I think there's a third group where the people who don't know, they don't get it, and they're drawn to listen. I sometimes imagine those sort of center confrontation. I've seen one or two passion plays where quite often the people who are either the occupying force or the critical people, so the Jewish leadership, will be on stage with very tall hats on. So human beings all roughly the same size, but on stage you saw these tall hats as very imposing, critical, looking down type thing. And if you're an ordinary person in that scenario, you might be aware of this confrontation with the tall hats and Jesus speaking and say, hey, what's going on here? And you can't help be drawn in to listen. So I think he's speaking to everybody, but in those three groups. Darkness, death is one form of darkness, but actually I think sometimes, sometimes people without faith sometimes find life very difficult. The colloquial phrase, oh yes, have you seen the light yet? Can you see the light? Implies that sometimes the world is so problematic that we can't see a way through. That's kind of how I see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else got any comments or questions? Cool. Okay, well, I'm sure we'll be able to pick that up a bit later when we look at them all three together. Ahmed, would you like to share the writings that you found about light?
Yes, of course. Like I said earlier, I would really like to commend the chaplain for picking such a very abstract topic. Really made me think about what I would like to talk about. But I'd like to take more time I always do. I take a personal approach. So I'm going to recite a few verses from a surah, from a chapter of the Quran. And I'm going to just try and explore some parallels I found in. These are just the thoughts I found from pondering on these ayahs, these verses. it's not really a tafsir. Maybe you might have heard of a tafsir, but a tafsir is more like a exegesis, which I looked up this morning, and it's a science of explanation of the Quran. So it's like an actual science within the Islamic faith, the Islamic tradition. But yeah, without further ado, I'll just read the Arabic as I do, and then translate it for you, and then go into it a little bit more as well. So أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So والضحى, by the morning sunlight, والليل إذا سجى, and the night when it falls still, ما ودعك ربك وما قلى, your Lord has not abandoned you, nor has he become hateful of you. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, and the next life is certainly far better for you than this one. وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْطِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى, and surely your Lord will give you so much. Your Lord will give so much to you that you will be pleased. أَلَمْ يَجِدِكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى, did he not find you as an orphan, then sheltered you? وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًا فَحَدَى, did he not find you unguided, then guided you? وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى, and did he not find you needy, then he satisfied your needs? فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ, so do not oppress the orphan. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْحَرْ, nor repulse the beggar. وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, and proclaim the blessings of your Lord. So that's the surah, that's the chapter, and there are a few ayahs, a few verses that particularly stand out to me or make me feel something, if you will. Well, the whole, again, like you're supposed to take everything in context, but I just want to focus on a few things. So you start off the chapter by saying what the chapter starts off with "Wat-duha," by the morning sunlight. And I guess what I also want to try and do is explore parallels. The morning sunlight comes and the day starts and darkness is gone. The darkness of the night is gone. And I guess in the context of talking about light, it perhaps is a parallel between how there's darkness and light comes. But yeah, there's that angle to it. And then the third ayah, Ma wadda'aka rabbuka wa ma qala, your Lord, O Prophet, has not abandoned you, nor has he become hateful of you. And to give context, this is Allah, God, speaking to the Prophet, and even in situations where there is darkness, and the chaplain was referring to how sometimes you don't even feel the connection, it's like, and you feel abandoned, and then when something happens, like there's a calamity, strikes, and you're like, why has such a merciful God, as they say, put me in such a predicament? Why is there so much suffering? Why is there so much darkness in the world? And people bring these questions, and perhaps I may be able to answer them with or shed some light to them with the following verses that came after that one, which is in the verse 4. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, and the next life is certainly far better for you than this one. I know it's very difficult for certain people to accept what comes after. And, perhaps even in our different faiths, there's different ideas of what comes after. But I know there's a lot of similarities as well. But the idea is that this life is a test at the end of the day, the way I see it, or the way I understand it's taught in Islam. This life is a test. And as we know, as we've completed many tests in our life in terms of education and stuff like that, not all tests are easy. Certain tests, really shakes you and really makes you pour out, a lot of, it's on the basis that not everything is easy. And this life for sure is not easy. Hence why Nigel talks about people having faith, is for me, I've found having faith makes life easier for me. As I've said many times before, there are bad times and there are good times. And just as there's darkness, light shall also come from that. The universe was created from darkness, you know, so there's that aspect to it as well. And then I think I'll go on to the 7th verse, which says, give me a second, sorry. وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًا فَهَدَى. Did he not find you unguided, then guided you? You know, and it's more of a thing like, again, another parallel is like there's ignorance, and then after ignorance, there is some kind of enlightenment. And I guess perhaps maybe darkness exists or bad things happen so you can appreciate good times. So when you're ignorant and you become enlightened, you appreciate that enlightenment so much more because, you know, you've seen the other side, if that makes sense, you know. And I guess just to finish off, the last verse, it says, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, and proclaim the blessings of your Lord. And one thing I have found in this period is that, or one thing I think I have learned, I don't know, it's easier said than done, but so many, you have to keep reminding yourselves of, we have to keep reminding ourselves rather of, because the mind wanders and it's easy for the mind to look at this and focus on this. And, you know, when really and truly, when you sit down, you pause and you reflect, like, okay, calm. Well, and again, it's not easy, it's something you learn through life how to do when calamity strikes, let's say. And then you start to appreciate that you're in a much better position than many other people in life are. There's things like you have been provided with food, or you're hungry, at least you got a little bit of money, even if it's just a little, you can go buy food, or you have a house, you can pay your rent, you know, you don't have to sleep outside in the cold. Last winter was something else, but we're here, we're through it, we can see the light now, spring's coming, you know? And yeah, and just even in simple things that we have, when we look at ourselves physically, we have hands, we have limbs, we have eyes, our eyes are working, we have speech, these kind of things, you know, and just appreciating the little things in moments of darkness, I think helps a lot, and, you know, ultimately leads you to then hopefully finding light and being content and all of that. And yeah, with all of that, I think that's all I prepared for today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, that comparison between light and darkness, and also light meaning a few different things as well, which is really interesting. So thank you. Does anyone want to ask Ahmed any questions or clarifications or anything like that, or comment on what they've heard?
I'm going to go one quick one. Actually, I'm going to two. There was one, your verse about being needy. Halfway through, there was a fantastic word that you used halfway through. Or something. What was that verse? Can you find it? It was so expressive. It was great.
The one about being needy. Let me see. Oh yeah, وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. Yeah.
It was just the way I thought, my word, that's an important verse. That's right. But the other thing,
when you read the Quran, there's something called tajweed. So there are rules to how you read the Quran, and that's basically, that's a mud. So like it's a elongation basically. So when you read and you see that comes,
to emphasize or something. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
But then the other thing, just I went out for a walk this morning very early because I love the dawn. And your point about the morning light, there's something quite special, isn't there, about almost like the first light of day after the night. It's a good time to get out, and I thought, yeah, I like that reference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Garang.
have a quick observation on Ahmed's talk, which is, can you hear me now?
Not very well.
Just speak up a little bit. That would be really helpful.
Is it audible now?
Yeah.
We can hear you, but just quite quiet.
Okay.
So just speak loudly.
Okay. My observation for Ahmed's writing was that light is usually symbolized as hope or something like that. My usual understanding would be that. But I guess in Ahmed's writing, it was more towards expectations and ambitions, which is like an interesting observation for me because I usually paint and I usually perceive light as something depicting hope, while I've never thought of it as an ambitious or expectation sort of a
It's
meaning
good.
behind it. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
quite interesting to know that.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and yeah, and it's another way of looking at it, isn't it? Which is great. So yeah. Excellent. Okay, Prayag, would you like to share your writings? That would be great.
Of course. So again, like Ahmed said, I think this was a really, really broad topic. And even within, I would say, all the different Hindu scriptures, there's so many different references to light and all in different kind of contexts. I think one of the key contexts that light is used in is as a metaphor for two things. One is of knowledge and one is of the permanence of God, of the divine. So I'll start by reading two quotes which show kind of how light is used. But then basically what I want to do today is talk about kind of how light has been misconstrued in modern Hindu thinking. And I think this is something which a lot of young Hindus that I've spoken to, and even myself, we've kind of found conflict with in our religion in the sense that there's issues of, like, for example, colorism in our religion, and the distinction between dark and light is sometimes not that easy to understand why it's being used. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so the first quote. This is from the Rig Veda, which is probably the earliest of the Hindu scriptures. It was written in about 3000 BC. The human body is the temple of God. One who kindles the light of awareness within gets true light. The sacred flame of your inner shrine is constantly bright. The experience of unity is the fulfillment of human endeavors. The mysteries of life are revealed. So that's kind of a cryptic quote, I would say. The Rig Veda is full of these kind of cryptic and poetic verses, which kind of allude to different aspects of life and try to paint a picture of it. So then the more one reads them, the more one can understand the complex ideas that they talk about. But in this context, light seems to be the awareness within. So it's almost like light is representing knowledge in this case. And that throughout Hinduism, that kind of overarching aim seems to be to get to a place of ultimate knowledge, of ultimate reality. And it's that constant journey towards something permanent. And the flip side of that is trying to transcend everything around us right now, which is impermanent and constantly changing. And then another quote which kind of links to describing how God is in the sense of light. So this is the quote. O seeker, know the true nature of your soul and identify yourself with it completely. O Lord, may we attain the everlasting consciousness of supreme light and joy. May we resolve to dedicate our life to the service of humankind and uplift them to divinity. Okay, so this is how I understand light, what light to mean in Hinduism, which is permanence of God and of knowledge. However, I feel like in modern kind of understandings of Hinduism, whether that's like through storytelling, it's kind of being misconstrued to be the dark and light that we perceive. So, for example, God kind of becomes associated with bright or lightness, or maybe even sunlight, whereas darkness is associated with more negative connotations. And the way I've been kind of taught to understand the religion is that this is not a correct interpretation, because even the so-called light that we see is also something impermanent. So then in that sense, to associate God with God, which is permanent, with something temporary, like for example, sunlight, I've been taught that doesn't really, you're not transcending the idea of impermanent things in the world. So in that sense, I thought of some parallels with what Ahmed and what Nigel were saying in the sense that if you see kind of, wait, let me think about what I want to say. Okay, I'm going to read one more quote. I'm going to read one more quote because I feel like I nearly know what I want to say, but I don't know precisely. Okay, so the quote I want to read is, "That supreme abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or by the moon, nor by fire. Those who reach it never return to this material world." So in that sense, what I want to say is that when we think of light, we're trying to think of like the supreme light. And in that sense, the distinction between darkness and light is something that like can guide us. But in terms of light and dark that we perceive around us, I feel like that is not something which Hinduism, I guess, kind of, I don't know. I feel like I didn't explain myself very well today. Apologize. I did prepare more than other weeks, but because this topic was extremely broad, yeah.
No, it's really interesting. Thank you, Priya, because it sounds, from what I understood, of like the light is permanence and God kind of thing, whereas the light that maybe Nigel and Ahmed have been talking about is more about in this world light as well. And Nigel touched on Jesus being the light, which I guess Christians are saying is a permanence kind of thing, but there is this kind of coming and going of light and dark in the other two, and maybe more of a,
I think,
is that kind of,
yeah, I think what I found is that even though kind of the scriptures that you guys referenced, they maybe refer to a different type of light, in the sense that maybe the light that I understand is a bit more metaphorical, but the conclusions that we reached were still kind of similar, in the sense that both our scriptures and your scriptures talked about God being maybe the source of light, and the fact that God is something permanent that we can reside in. Whereas, yeah. So I think that even though the understanding of light might have been different, there were still similar conclusions.
Yeah, Nigel, you're desperate to say something.
If prayer goes loud, another verse, can I have another verse?
Of course.
No, because there's a great linkage with, this is separate to what I chose earlier, but I'm reading with summary Revelation, which is the last book in our writings, and it's a book at the very end is about the new earth and new heaven, so the end of this earth as we know it. And it is really interesting because it ties in completely. I'll just read one verse. It says, "The new city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. On no day will its gate ever be shut, because there's no light there." And so here we, in our writings too, the end time, there's no sun, there's no moon, there's no darkness, because God is the permanent light. So it's a really interesting parallel.
I just like to say, I really like how Parag likes to explore complex like, how do you say, complex topics within religion or within the faith, and how he also likes to explore conflicts as well of opinion and things like that. I think that's really important, and it really, for me, I feel like it really improves one's understanding of a certain topic.
Yeah.
You know, I also like quite a few things you said regarding in terms of the permanence of knowledge or something along those lines, and knowledge referring to light. And the idea is that the truth always comes out. The truth, you know, the truth isn't affected by darkness or by lies or that kind of situation. So that's what one thing I was thinking about when you said that. And I think there's something else, but it's escaping my mind. But if it does come back, I'll let you know.
Very interesting.
Gaurang, did you want to add anything to what Prayag was saying about light from the Hindu faith?
Yeah, sure. So like Prayag already explained a lot of it, and I guess to sum up, basically, I can just say that light is permanent, like he said, and darkness can be construed as absence of light, as in it's not darkness, but it's just absence of light. So light is always there, but it's just not perceived that way sometimes. So it's all about perspective, basically. So light is always there. You just have to perceive it that way. That's all.
I wanted to ask a question to you guys as well. Sometimes I find that our scriptures sometimes don't tie in with like the things that we're taught. Do you guys also have that problem? So like sometimes when there's like ideas which are super complex in your scriptures, but then the way that they're understood like by modern people in your faith or by young people, for instance, it doesn't tie in with kind of how it should be. And then if you guys have that conflict, and then how do you go about trying to resolve it?
Ahmed, you go first.
I think, yeah, it's something I've thought about. Quite a few things. Like, as I've gone older, I've realized like life is a lot more complex than it's made seem in like certain presentations in the media and movies and stuff like this. Like, many things in life tend to not have a straight answer, you know. And when it comes to like things in the scripture and faith, and when you think about like the history and how all the elements of it, it's like, I feel like as young people, or the way society is now, you expect, okay, this is the topic. By the end of the discussion of the topic, you have an answer, you know. I feel like a lot of times, like as humans, we're limited in how we can communicate and how we even understand certain things. And certain things require time and sometimes even generations, you know, at the end of the day. But it's always constantly striving to understand all the parts of it. But in this day and age, I feel like attention span is an issue, and it's more about clickbait and, yeah, I said this and this is how, you know, just all this kind of like weird situation. No one's actually like appreciating the fact that, as you said, knowledge is from God, and God is the one who has all knowledge, you know. And it's like, and it shows us our limitations as humans, that we don't have all knowledge. And that's why I guess through life you try and like find as much knowledge as you can, because you never stop learning till the moment in which you stop learning is the moment in which you're not alive anymore. So yeah, that's how I feel about that.
I love this. And that's a gold question, Prayag. And Ahmed, I think it's spot on. And one of the difficulties that we have in the Christian faith is that people approach complex situations with sometimes literal understanding of scripture, which is out of context. And so they say something which actually just does not ring true for today's world. And so what's the answer? Well, I think the answer, I know the older I get, the more I don't know. That's the first thing. I think the other thing as well is to just really try and understand, you know, the context by a certain scripture, and to have the courage to say, okay, that applied then, but doesn't apply now in a different circumstance. And I think I think we're maturing all the time on to be in that, I think. Yeah,
but it's also interesting into how these ancient writings actually still do feed us, though, don't they? Yeah. It's really, really fascinating. So even though sometimes it's difficult to work out how they can feed us, you know, how something that ancient can feed us and how it works out in everyday life, it is still really interesting that there are these beautiful faith writings that you've all brought today. about light and how, you know, Ahmed, you were saying about ambition and, you know, aim and stuff like that. And also it sounded, I picked up from like helping people in difficult circumstances as well. And then the Christian faith as well with the light now. And then both of them, you know, kind of all the Hindu one as well, looking at the permanence of light. And I guess going back to last time of hope and having this light as a hope that we look forward to. So it's really interesting how, even though they don't, it is sometimes tricky to work out how they are relevant for today. There are bits that you kind of go, oh yeah, that's really great, isn't it? Yeah. Is there anyone? Yeah, Ahmed, please do share.
Something that I made sure to try and come back to is that Guarang mentioned how he paints. I think I heard you say that you paint, and I think it's pretty interesting how like art helps us understand certain aspects of things better and how you represent certain things. I just wanted to ask everyone, do they have any like artistic way or any the English is escaping me, but like, is anyone interested in like artistic endeavors and stuff like that?
I don't know if this is relevant, just on the topic of light and art, actually. One of the things that a lot of Hindus struggle to come to terms with is like, if you look at a lot of artistic depictions of gods and goddesses, they're often painted white. And I think this is kind of the crux of what I was trying to get at about like how light is described in the scriptures and how what it's come to mean in Hindu beliefs nowadays. Is like the reason why those have been painted. By the way, those like the way they're described in scriptures is not as Krishna. The word Krishna means dark. The word Sham is another word for Krishna, means nighttime. So he was dark skinned, but if you go to temples, he's fair skinned. So part of this like is maybe due to like colorism in society and racism and colonialism maybe, but also part of it I feel like is because of such a complex idea of like light being knowledge, light being permanence of the divine has been translated and simplified into like light being the whiteness that we perceive. So, yeah, I think art is very important in terms of people's understanding of religion.
I think that all I'd say is a huge subject. I mean, Ahmed, thank you for such a great, hugely brilliant question. Just as we conclude, we come back to it. But I just think that I was just thinking of the emotion when you see pictures of light. So, for example, you know, a fantastic sunrise, or you know, quite often faith is depicted as a beam of light shining down onto some darkness. And I think the emotion of that, when you say, wow, that's a good picture, that sort of wow feeling is in itself a kind of declaration of faith, isn't it? Wow, look at that. A thought?
It's been really interesting just listening to all these different light and darkness and how these writings can inspire us. We're going to have to bring this to a close now. But thank you so much for all the work that you put into preparing and the discussion that we've had. It's been really fascinating. So thank you very much. And look forward to our next discussion. So yes.
Hey, great to see you guys. Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.